At the company's annual banquet, my department head shook his head and said into the mic, "She's proof that persistence can sometimes almost make up for mediocrity." Everyone laughed politely as I sat frozen in humiliation. 2 months later, after his dirty secrets were exposed in a scandal, I was the one chosen to replace him, and I made sure he knew exactly why. I work for a logistics company in Toledo, Ohio. It's not a glamorous job, but it's steady. I've been there 8 years. My job is in operations, and I'm good at what I do. Not flashy, not loud, but solid. I know the systems inside and out. I've trained half the people on the floor. If something breaks, I'm usually the one fixing it, even if someone else gets credit. My boss, well, former boss, was named Mark Drayton. He walked around like he owned the place. Wore tailored suits, polished his shoes during meetings, had this cold smile that never touched his eyes. You know the type. The kind of guy who'll call you kiddo even if you're only 3 years younger. He didn't respect quiet people. He liked performers, those who made him look good. I wasn't one of them. I was just reliable. I'd been passed over for promotion 3 times. Mark said I lacked leadership presence. Translation: I didn't network, didn't flirt, didn't fake small talk at company mixers. I just worked. I never pushed back. I just kept hoping if I did a good enough job, someone would notice. That was my mistake. Every year we have this fancy banquet at a hotel downtown. They rent a ballroom, serve filet mignon, hire a jazz band. It's the one time the company tries to pretend we're more important than we are. That year, October, I showed up in a simple black dress. Nothing fancy. I wasn't expecting anything. I figured I'd drink a bit of wine, clap for people I barely knew, and go home. Then they called my name during the award section. I remember freezing. I thought maybe they made a mistake. But no, my name was on the screen. Outstanding contributor. Operations department. I walked up to the stage in shock. That's when Mark decided to introduce me. He stood at the mic, his face shiny with drink, and said, "Well, she's proof that persistence can sometimes almost make up for mediocrity." People laughed. Some looked at their plates. Some smiled politely. I heard one guy, Derek from inventory, actually snort. I stood there while Mark handed me the plaque, still chuckling, and I smiled like I wasn't dying inside. I went back to my table and stared at the bread basket for the rest of the night. My stomach hurt. My hands were shaking. I drove home without saying goodbye to anyone. I cried in the car the whole way. The next day, I didn't report it to HR. I didn't send an angry email. I didn't post on LinkedIn. I just got quiet. But inside, something snapped. I decided I wasn't going to take it anymore. I started staying late, but not to help others. I started collecting things, watching patterns, studying Mark. He was sloppy. He'd always been sloppy, but I hadn't paid attention before. I started digging into his department expenses. He had a company card. He used it often: travel, client meals, office needs. I requested old reports under the guise of optimizing departmental costs. No one blinked. What I found made my heart race. He was billing the company for personal items. Thousands of dollars. Spa visits, clothing, even a weekend in Chicago that didn't line up with any company events. He'd labeled it vendor relations. But I checked. There was no vendor meeting that weekend. No one else from the company was there. I took screenshots, printed reports, built a folder. I also started asking quiet questions. People in accounting, someone in travel bookings, a woman in compliance who always seemed annoyed at Mark. Little by little, I pieced it together. Mark was using company money like it was his own. And worse, he'd been cutting staff training budgets to save costs while still throwing himself steak dinners on the company dime. I waited until after Thanksgiving, right after bonuses were approved. Then I sent everything anonymously to the regional VP and HR. It only took a week for things to fall apart. He was called into a closed-door meeting on a Tuesday morning. When he came out, his face was pale. He didn't say a word. By Friday, his office was empty. No public explanation. Just gone. 2 weeks later, I was called into a meeting with upper leadership. They said they were restructuring and wanted someone with operational insight and institutional knowledge to help transition the department. They offered me his job, interim, at first. I accepted. Quietly. Professionally. The first day I moved into his office, I found a drawer full of breath mints and empty cologne bottles. I threw them all out. I didn't gloat. I didn't tell anyone it was me. But I sent Mark a single message through LinkedIn, just 3 words, still here. Persisting. No response. But he read it. The office felt different once I was in charge. People walked slower around me, talked softer. Some looked nervous. Others suddenly wanted to be my best friend. I didn't trust any of them. Mark had built a department full of performers, people who knew how to look busy, not how to be useful. It was a mess. And now I had to clean it up. I started going through old project files, team budgets, and review notes. What I found made my head spin. Mark had buried people. There was a woman, Mara, from the vendor relations team who had been marked as non-essential. He'd cut her hours, said she wasn't producing. But I read her emails, her notes. She had been the one holding 2 key supplier contracts together during a port crisis last year. Mark had taken credit for fixing it. He even got a bonus for that. I called Mara back, offered her a role. She cried on the phone, said no one had ever fought to bring her back. Another file showed that Mark had blackballed a junior analyst named Connor. Quiet kid, smart, a bit anxious. Apparently, Mark didn't like the way he spoke up in a meeting about one of Mark's reports being wrong. Mark made sure Connor was never promoted. Always gave him the worst assignments. Eventually, Connor left. I tracked him down on LinkedIn. He was working at a call center. Said he'd given up on corporate jobs. I hired him back. Double his old salary. That's when the whispers started. Some of the older team leads didn't like the changes. Said I was cleaning house. Said I had a vendetta. Maybe I did. I just didn't lie about it. Then one of them, Shay, started getting sloppy. Missed deadlines. Blamed his junior staff. Told someone in HR that I was playing favorites. I invited him into my office. Calmly. I laid out every deadline he'd missed, every excuse, every complaint that had been forwarded to me. He tried to bluff his way through it. I told him he had 2 choices, shape up or ship out. He resigned the next day. Then came the email. Anonymous, no signature. Just a subject line. You think you're clean? Inside was a forwarded message. One I had written 5 years ago to a coworker, small complaint about company policies. I barely remembered it, but the message had been twisted. Words pulled out of context. It made me sound bitter, disloyal. Then another email came. This one with screenshots from my Facebook, photos from college, parties, friends. Nothing scandalous, but enough to make me wonder. Who was digging through my past? I realized then someone was trying to fight back. Someone loyal to Mark. I checked my door logs. Reviewed system access. There were logins into my project files from a remote desktop in Indiana, where Mark was last known to be living. My guess? He still had a friend inside. Someone passing him information. So I started setting traps. I created a fake project folder labeled Leadership Realignment Proposal. Inside were phony memos, names of people being considered for removal, even some made-up gossip about the VP. I sat back and waited. 5 days later, parts of it showed up on an industry blog. A blog Mark used to contribute to. It was spun as an inside scoop on toxic new management at our company. I printed the blog post. Then I called an IT. They traced the login back to one account, Greg D., a systems analyst hired by Mark 2 years ago. I had Greg escorted out of the building that afternoon. But I wasn't done. I found out Mark had been trying to start a consulting business, selling his expertise to smaller logistics companies. I made a few calls. Quiet ones. Let them know about his spending scandal. Offered them some anonymous insights. 2 of them dropped him. That same week, a friend in HR forwarded me something Mark had posted on his private Instagram, a photo of me, taken secretly from across the street from our building. Caption: This is what corporate cancer looks like. That was the final straw. I called legal. I wanted him done. Our company's legal team got involved right away. That photo he posted, it crossed a line. They called it targeted harassment. They said I could press charges. I told them I needed a few days to think. Not because I was scared, but because I wasn't done yet. The same week, I got an odd text from a number I didn't recognize. Watch your back. You're not the only one who can play dirty. I knew it had to be Mark. He was unraveling. He'd gone from cocky and cruel to reckless and sloppy. He never thought someone like me would fight back, let alone win. And now, he was flailing in every direction, trying to pull me down with him. That's when something happened I didn't see coming. I got a call from a woman named Caroline Phelps. She used to work under Mark at a different company in Dayton before he came to ours. She had heard what happened through the grapevine, how he got fired, how I took over, how things were changing. She asked if we could talk. I met her at a diner off I-75. She was in her late 40s, sharp eyes, worn expression. We sat down, and without small talk, she said, "He ruined me. And I think he's done it to others, too." She told me Mark had made advances. At first subtle, compliments, offhand comments. Then it got more direct. He threatened her job when she didn't play along. When she reported it, he launched a quiet campaign to make her look incompetent. 2 months later, she was let go. She said there were others. Maybe a half dozen. Some settled. Some walked away in silence. None had spoken publicly. I felt sick. What I had gone through, the humiliation, the subtle sabotage, it wasn't personal. It was his pattern. That changed everything. I asked Caroline if she had proof. She didn't. But she gave me names. I spent the next 2 weeks tracking them down. Emails, phone calls, DMs. 2 of the women agreed to meet. One of them, Andrea, showed me text messages from a burner number Mark had used. Gross, manipulative stuff. She still had screenshots. I asked them if they'd be willing to talk to legal. Or even HR. Both said no. They were too tired. Too afraid. Too defeated. So I did it for them. I turned everything over to corporate legal. With names. With copies. With timelines. I made sure HR saw it, too. This time, they didn't just listen. They opened a formal investigation. Quiet, but serious. Meanwhile, I kept getting anonymous texts. "You think you've won? You don't even know what's coming. You're playing with fire. Hope your past is clean." I wasn't scared. I was angry. He was still trying to control the story. But I knew something he didn't. I'd been saving one last piece of leverage. During my dig into Mark's old expense reports, I found something odd, a payment to a storage unit on the east side of town. Not in the system. Not on any official list. He paid it using a company card, labeled Temporary Off-Site Archiving. It wasn't his unit. It was under a Shell LLC. But I tracked it down. I drove out there one Saturday, walked through rows of metal doors, and stared at Unit 406. And I made a decision. I paid for legal access through the company's fraud office. They signed off. We popped the lock. Inside were boxes. Labeled. Organized. Some from our company. Others from his last 2 jobs. Inside those boxes? Hard copies of reports he had no right to keep. Contracts. Copies of employee reviews. Old memos marked confidential. Some of them had women's names on them. Notes in the margins. Circled phrases. "Watch her" written in blue ink. It was evidence. Tons of it. Corporate lost their minds when they saw it. But I didn't stop there. I made one more move. I scheduled a private, off-site meeting with a local reporter. Someone who specialized in workplace misconduct. I handed her copies of the reports. Told her I couldn't go on the record yet. But she could talk to Caroline. And Andrea. And maybe more. The story wasn't published. Not yet. But it was being written. And Mark? He had no idea. But he was about to find out. 2 weeks after that meeting with the reporter, everything exploded. The story dropped on a Monday morning. Right at 9 a.m. A full investigation, complete with interviews from 3 former employees, Caroline, Andrea, and a third woman named Brielle, who came forward at the last minute. It was detailed. It was ugly. The headline read, "Whispers and Warnings: How One Logistics Executive Left a Trail of Broken Careers Across 3 Cities." Mark's name was front and center. So was the name of our company. The article quoted anonymous sources, my words. It mentioned the fake expense reports, the inappropriate behavior, the threats, and even the storage unit. The company released a statement that day claiming zero tolerance and ongoing investigations. Mark tried to go on the defense. He posted on LinkedIn a long, pathetic post filled with phrases like character assassination and cancel culture witch hunt. But it backfired. Badly. By Tuesday, he was trending for the wrong reasons. One of his consulting clients dropped him. Then another. Then all of them. Wednesday, a lawyer contacted our company on behalf of one of the women quoted in the article. They were suing. Corporate panicked. HR was gutted. The legal team started scrubbing everything. Then came the phone call. Mark called me. Blocked number. I picked up without thinking. At first, he didn't say anything. Just breathed. Then he spoke low and quiet. "You did this." I didn't answer. "You don't win, you know that? You think this makes you powerful? It makes you disgusting." Still, I didn't speak. "You're nothing but a bitter little parasite. I made you." That's when I said it. "You mocked me in front of 300 people, Mark. You laughed while I stood there like a damn joke. You ruined lives. Not just mine. Yours was the only name missing from the damage. That's done now." He went quiet, then hung up. I stared at my phone for a while. I wish I could say I felt good, proud, vindicated. But the truth is, I felt tired. I had spent months gathering information, watching my back, setting traps, cleaning up his mess. And somewhere along the way, I'd lost parts of myself too. I stopped sleeping, stopped smiling. My hands still shook sometimes, like they had that night at the banquet. I wasn't a victim anymore. But I wasn't free, either. Then the company made its move. I was called into a meeting with the board. They thanked me for the information, for the internal improvements, for my integrity under pressure. But they were scared. The story was growing. Lawsuits were stacking. Investors were nervous. They told me I was being offered a package. Not a promotion. A severance. They said it was time to turn the page. A fresh start for the whole team. I wasn't shocked. They weren't firing me because I did something wrong. They were firing me because I did too much right. So I took the check. I signed the papers. And I walked out with my head high. Mark lost everything. His career, his reputation, his public voice. Nobody was returning his calls anymore. His LinkedIn went dark. His name was poison in the industry. As for me, I moved to Columbus. Took a consulting gig with a nonprofit. Smaller office, fewer games. I make less money, but I sleep through the night. Sometimes when I check the news or look at old photos, I wonder if I went too far. If the revenge was too much. But then I remember that night. The way the room laughed. The way he smirked. The way I stood there, heart racing, trying not to cry. And I remember what it felt like to take that pain and turn it into fire. I wasn't born for war, but I sure as hell finished his.